Hello and welcome to Childminding and Beyond with me, Beth.
And me, Sam.
This morning we are joined by a very special guest, and we appreciate him coming on and using up his Sunday morning. And we've got James from the Nursery Nook, which I'm going to hand over to so he can introduce himself.
Hi guys, thanks for having me. So my name is James Tunnell. I run Nursery Nook. I've been running Nursery Nook for just over 5 years now, and it's been a bit of a journey for me in terms of getting to this point. So I originally trained as a primary school teacher in the early years, did 4 years worth of training, and throughout those 4 years, I was working in reception, year one, and then when I came to do my very first sort of interview for a job, I was offered nursery, and I was really umming and ahhing because I'd not actually done any work in nursery, and I wasn't sure if it was really going to be right for me. Did my NQT year, absolutely fell in love with it, and they couldn't get me out of nursery for over a decade. I wasn't able to get out, I didn't want to get out. And I just really grew a passion for nursery life, for nursery process, learning an awful lot about it. I did about 10 years teaching, and then things started to change. As we know, the school sector's changed quite a lot recently.
Yeah.
And I was becoming really disillusioned with what I was being asked to do. It was no longer just about the teaching. So that's when I started to dip my toe into supporting people on Nursery Nook, doing some training, having conversations, sharing new ideas. And then after the pandemic, I realised actually this is going really well. People are really interested in this, so I decided to take the leap and went for it full time. So now I support schools, practitioners, childminders, whoever wants to help in early years on improving their practice and their provision.
Wow, amazing. What a journey. I think the COVID pandemic has definitely been a turning point for a lot of people, haven't they? Of, where they are and where they want to go. That's amazing. What a journey.
Absolutely. I think I dipped my toe before the pandemic, and it was a very different sort of landscape. A lot of people wanted activity ideas, a lot of people wanted support in, making their provision quite formal in a lot of ways. But actually, post-pandemic, it's been a real sort of different approach that I've taken, which is essentially why I got into schema play, which is what I'm going to talk about today. Are you guys happy for me to go straight into it?
Go for it. I mean, I think schemas is something that, interests us all, isn't it? Yeah, it's there in our everyday life. So yeah, go ahead, James. Thank you.
What's really interesting though is throughout a 4 year degree, I wasn't told about schemas once. No one brought it up, no one mentioned it to me whatsoever. I actually learnt about schemas by having a long conversation in my first year of teaching with a nursery nurse. She'd done the NNEB, which I consider
Yeah,
the gold standard for lots of people. It's brilliant.
definitely.
She was talking to me about schemas because I was becoming really frustrated at some of these children engaging in certain behaviours like throwing things across the room, posting things behind the radiator covers, and
Yeah.
they would never come back. We couldn't get them taken off the wall. And she told me all about this, and it really resonated with me, and it made a lot of sense. As I was starting to deliver training through Nursery Nook, I started to do a lot of support with schools and settings around loose parts. And
Yeah.
naturally, through our conversations, schema kept coming up time and time again. And it was a fascinating sort of snippet, a little part of the training where people would start to share their frustrations around what the children were doing. I don't want to put these resources out because what they're going to do is they're just going to chuck it across the room or they're going to break it. And it was just really fascinating. And it was one of those things where I listened to the conversations and thought, okay, I get it. I get your frustrations. I do understand. But I didn't really do a huge amount with it. It was just one of those things that I felt as a sector we just had to cope with. Then I went to a conference. I went to this conference in Birmingham. It was at one of the universities, and I'm a very sociable creature in a lot of contexts, but when I'm in a conference, I like to talk to people in a group, and then when it's lunchtime, leave me alone. I need some downtime where I can just
Yeah,
hide in a corner. Um,
definitely.
so
Definitely.
I
Reflect.
absolutely, well, yes, I need some cooling down time. So I went into the sort of little foyer that they had, and I started to eat my lunch in the corner, and I was next door to this guy selling books. And now I can't help myself. If I see someone selling books, I've got to go and see the books, buy the books, spend too much
Yeah.
money.
Yeah, we're there.
So I bought this book by Lynette Brock and John Siraj Blackford, and it was called Schema Play Activity Ideas. And I thought, oh, schema! I've been talking to people about schema loads, so let's buy this book.
Yeah.
So I bought it, and then I went back to my little room. And as I'm waiting for my next group to arrive, I started to look through the different activities, and it said things like pirates as a schema, adventure as a schema, and I thought, wait a minute, that's not right. Schemas are throwing things and posting things. What is she on about with this? And I spent quite a lot of money on the book. And so I thought, you know what, I really need to follow this through. So I reached out to Lynette Brock. I was like, I really want to know more about this. And so I booked onto a conference, and it was in March 2020, and that got cancelled because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
So then she did some training on delivering the schema play approach. And I thought, in for a penny, in for a pound, I'm just going to sign up for this. Did the training, and it just blew my mind. I had no idea the complexities around these behaviours. I thought for a long time that they were essentially quite mindless. You know, these are just these behaviours that children wanted to do. There wasn't a particular reason for them, but it just completely shook my world. So that's when I started to bake in schema play, and I became a trainer with the company, and that's what I do now. A lot of my work is working with people right across the earlier sector to spot these schemes, to do something about them, and to really understand how it all fits in and works together.
Yeah. I think a lot of people, a lot of practitioners do find them quite frustrating, don't they? Like you said, the posting behind things, the throwing, or the transporting, you know, where they put everything in a bag. Like, you've set up this brilliant, you know, activity, and along comes a child with a bag, pops it all in and walks off. And yeah, I think that's what people find the most frustrating, I think, don't they?
Absolutely, it's the destructive element of it.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know, I have clients who will purchase very ornate, very beautiful, aesthetically beautiful resources for their environment that end up getting broken or discarded quite quickly because a child might pick it up and throw it or do something else with it. It's really about, I suppose, picking the resources that resonate with the particular schemes of the children that you've got in your environment and with you. And every child's different. Every child will display different ones. Most people believe that there are roughly about sort of 8 to 10 different schemas, and you'll find those in the books, things like trajectory, rotation. Sometimes they've got slightly different terms and names. In schema play, we use the research by Chris Athy, who did some work with the Frobel project, and she found that there are at least 24 different behaviours. And that list is quite extensive, and it covers quite a lot of different things. Some really unusual ones. So the one that I always talk to people about that used to drive me insane and I had no idea about it was dabbing. So taking a brand new felt tip pen that you've just put out on your art table and then just sort of bashing it into the table, seemingly to destroy the pen, but actually that behaviour itself is something that a child needs to do to make sense of the world around them. And it's really fascinating. Once people actually sort of begin to spot those schemes, they begin to see them en masse, some quite unusual ones emerging as well.
I did my training. Sorry, James. I did my training with you. Was it last year or the year before? The schema training, and I focused on dabbing. And and it's one that I never realised was part of schema play.
No, I didn't either.
And now I've recognised it. I see it all the time.
Yeah.
And going back to when we were saying you put out a nice activity, and they just like transport it to somewhere else or they throw it across the room. I think once you recognise what schema play a child is interested in, it's then adapting your setting and getting resources that they can use to enhance and bring that child along in that way. And that's something that's massively opened my eyes since doing your training a couple of years ago.
Yeah, honestly, I understand why people set up activities in a particular way, and I think, you know, most of the time people they really sort of begin to understand, I suppose, what's making a child take the set things up that's going to be inviting to the children, that's going to move that learning forward. But if you've got a child who's displaying a particular physical behaviour like a schema, then actually those activities that you're setting up might need to sort of take a back seat a little bit. Instead, we need to have a rich environment with lots of, say, loose parts resources that can be moved. Because if you think about loose parts, this open-ended resource realm, you can do as much as you want with those things. You know, if you've got a child who's a thrower, great, those are brilliant for throwing. If you've got a child who's a poster or a container, those are great for that as well. Whereas some of these activities we set up can be quite narrow for the group of children we've got. Even if you've only got a couple of children, it's difficult if you're setting up these quite focused activities. But they do have a place at the same time. You know, if you've got children who are perhaps moving on to more complex behaviours. Should I talk a little bit about sort of brain development with schema play? Would that be useful?
Go for it. That amazes me every time someone talks about brain development.
Yeah. So this is something that, again, that I hadn't realised is, you know, it all links back to Piaget's sort of stages of play. So we know that for our very youngest children, they struggle to be able to internalize their thinking. So in order to make sense of a process around them, they've got to physically act it out. So if you're teaching children a new concept, they might have to physically be involved in it. And we know this in the earlier sector. We're really big on play, but we seem to forget about it as children sort of progress, especially when they get hit about sort of 3 or 4. We tend to have more sort of focus activities, more carpet-based play experiences, but children still need to have those opportunities to act things out. So an experience could be something like, say, driving to nursery with your mum, and as mum's driving to nursery, she might go round a roundabout really fast, and as she's going around that roundabout, you might feel your whole body sort of shift in the car, and you and your mum might have a really great time on that little experience. You get dropped off at nursery. Mum doesn't say anything to the practitioners because that's not really a thing that you think to communicate, to the practitioner. It's just a normal everyday parent experience. But for that child, that really interesting experience of going round and round might have been the first time they've felt that emotion in their body. In which case, what they'll start to do is use rotation in their environment, seek out opportunities to spin around, to spin other people around, to spin objects around, to make sense of what it means to go round and round. Now, in order for us to be able to do that, we have to have that really rich environment of those rotational capacities. So having those open-ended resources, but lots of other toys that might spin and move about. When it comes down to it, schema play is about supporting the links between what came before and what's coming essentially next in the future. So we have to have that really strong foundation, that basis to build those things off. So that example of the child who's perhaps engaging in lots of rotation, they need to have explored those rotational resources in the first place. They need to have had some time to pick them up, throw them about, spin them around in their own time, perhaps interact with other children, but also do lots of solitary play with those things. We can't do new rotational activities if we haven't had that foundation to build that off of to begin with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's just linking it from like going round the roundabout and, just very simple things that happen in their life that they're like, yeah, I like that. That gave me a good feeling. What can I do to, to extend that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's
really simple things that you don't even think would have an impact or affect that child, that actually they just want to go and explore it even more.
Yeah, it's slowing down of the learning process. I think sometimes we see something that a child's interested in and we think, oh, I can do loads of things with that. I'm really excited. I can push this in lots of different directions. But actually, if a child is experiencing rotation for quite, perhaps their first time, or even, the first time they've been on a roundabout or something like that, they might need multiple days to really begin to understand what that process feels like in their body, to experience it in lots of different contexts. And some of the people I guide through the accreditation, I say to them, just sit with this, just provide a new resource, play with it with the child for days or even weeks. Let them really begin to understand what it feels like, and only when they've really played with it for a long period of time, they'll be able to absorb that and really lay those foundations in their brain of what it feels like to do that experience. Are they ready for that next step? And schema play, it sort of taps into what a lot of our people are already doing in the sector around, say, like interest-led planning. We've had topic-based planning for such a long time, where the practitioners take the lead on what the learning is going to be, and sort of, the journey ahead of them. And it might be a 6-week topic on something like mini beasts or growing, and the practitioner knows what's going to be put out in the provision because they might have a box or something somewhere. Interest-led planning's meant to be, it's not always quite done, quite the right way, but it's meant to be about responding to what a child does in the moment, bringing something out based off of that, seeing how the child responds to it, and then putting new things out the next day. Sometimes people get a bit muddled and they create like a mini topic, without, watching what the child does on a daily basis. Schema play really reinforces that idea of, we're not planning 2 steps ahead, we're planning to enhance, or we call it seeding in schema play, planting that seed, say on a Tuesday based off what we saw on the Monday. Together we'll get a resource and we'll say, oh Toby, look, I found this in the cupboard, would you like to have a look at it together? Maybe we could discover what we could do together with it. Having that time together with it to explore, let them play with it independently, and then you take a step back, maybe few days, weeks, and then you begin to see what they do with it, and then that might take you on a different journey altogether, down a different route. That idea of the roundabout, well, yeah, rotation might be something that's really interesting for the child, but actually, when it comes down to it, if they end up using things like bikes and trikes to explore rotation, they then might notice the speed of those bikes and the trikes, and suddenly you might start to go down the route of, or the journey of, speed and trajectory and throwing things in pulleys. I love a pulley. If I can get people to go and just start getting more pulleys in their system, I think it'd be great. But it's about letting the child take ownership on where that journey is going to end up.
Definitely, and I suppose it links, you know. So they, like you say, they start at one point, and then it leads, which may take you to a different, you know, to a different point. And it's just believing in your children and letting them lead, isn't it? And I think, like you said, it goes back to, you know, you've got topics, and then people are like, right, we're packing all that away, and it's something else. And I always say this when I do like Instagram lives and that we've got Easter out. Easter will stay out until the children have finished playing with it. It's not going away because Easter was last week and that's it, back in the box until next. It's there. And our children are now transporting those eggs around because they're reliving that Easter egg hunt that they had last weekend from their first-hand experiences. And it will stay there until they stop playing with it.
100%.
And I think, yeah, like you say with topics, it's like, right, that's done, box it up, move it on. Whereas you need to give those children that time, like you say, days, weeks, even months, with those resources to explore them in different ways.
So Easter's really interesting. So I haven't really talked about this yet. I was going to. The distinction between, we've got two different terms here. We've got scheme and schema. And people use the term schema to refer to the physical behaviours that we see quite a lot. In the original research by Piaget, he used the term scheme to refer to the behaviours. I'm not really massively bothered what people call them. You can call them anything you want. But what he said in his research was these physical behaviours, they are because of a sort of a background thought, something that's powering an experience that's happening. So Easter itself, we could call Easter a schema, you know, to learn to experience Easter and all the nuances about Easter, about eggs, about chocolate, about rabbits. All of these are new experiences, same for Christmas and other festivals we have throughout the year. Children need a long time to really process and make connections between, wait a minute, I know a rabbit, my auntie's got a rabbit in her garden, but all of a sudden there's a rabbit putting eggs out. Do rabbits lay eggs? What's going on? There's a, you know, it's trying to form that connection and understand and really get their head around the schema of Easter, and that can take a very long, long period of time. But I think a lot of practitioners are really concerned about pace and coverage. You know, I've got my children for a certain amount of time. I really want to teach them lots and lots and lots, but actually, we know that so much of the learning that happens in early years happens around the activities we do. So, you know, we might be exploring Easter together, but we're learning about taking turns and having conversations and sharing because we have natural conversations. So that learning does happen. We just need to take a little bit of a step back sometimes and relax into it, you know.
Exactly, and then they have a deeper understanding, don't they? Rather than going, right, we're doing Easter, next week it's bees, next week's it's me. If you use Easter for quite a long period of time, then it just gets a deeper understanding. We've got a two-year-old, and he's linked Father Christmas with the Easter Bunny, and he actually called it Hop Santa. Because it's a bunny, but he's brought him eggs, he's brought him a present, do you know what I mean? So he's linked those two, and he calls it Hop Santa.
That's so
And
funny.
it's just that link, isn't it?
It's that thing that gives me something, that gives me a present. I love that. That's brilliant. And you're right, that's a connection the child's formed in their brain between Santa and Easter. And that will stay forever as well, as long as...
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, it's... You know, we talk about brain development quite a lot, but actually the truth is, unless we really support children to form connections before the age of 5, we lose a lot of those opportunities. You know... I'm going to use an analogy here, but if anyone's listening and they've got a background in psychology, please do not come at me because it really is oversimplified. But what we have as adults, how we've organised our knowledge and learning in our brain, is we put things kind of together almost in these little like boxes in our brain. So it's almost like if I cracked your head open, you'd have almost like a resource cupboard with a box that says Easter, a box that says Christmas, etc., etc. And all your experiences about those things live inside those boxes. But we only have those boxes organised in that particular way because we've had lots of opportunities to play and explore throughout our lives, especially when we were very young. Our young children, especially those children perhaps who come from us where they don't have as many experiences, therefore have formed fewer links, they need to have that rich opportunity. But you're far better going deeper with, say, Easter for a longer period of time than you are superficially going across a lot of knowledge, because we can't form connections, say, between Santa and the Easter Bunny. Because if you see the Easter Bunny on a card or on a poster, and you don't talk about it, you just see it and you move on, you've learnt nothing about it. You've seen
No.
a picture, but that's it. So we need to have that depth within that knowledge. But I love that experience. It's really interesting. I wonder if that's going to carry on in their lives as well. Every time there's some kind of giver of presents, whether they'll form that connection.
Oh, I don't know. I'll keep you informed.
Amazing. But yeah, so that's what a lot of my work is at the moment, working with Schema Play. So I deliver the accreditation process for the Schema Play company. So I work with practitioners who are based in schools and settings, but also childminders, and we explore moving their practice towards a more sort of positive Schema Play approach.
Yeah.
Do you want me to talk a little bit more about that? Would that be
Go
useful?
for it. That would be amazing if you can, James.
So yeah, obviously, Beth, you've been through the process with me. It was last year, I think it was. So on the face of it, on paper, it does look like you're just gathering observations, but the real value comes through the coaching. So the idea is you start off your process, having done the training, you begin to spot those behaviours, those 24 different behaviours in action. So it could be looking for a dabber, it could be looking for a child who's engaging in rotation or containing. Once we've sort of spotted those, we're thinking about what is available in my provision naturally for them to be able to go and gather and source to move their learning forward themselves, but also what could I put out as an enhancement, as a seed to develop their understanding or their knowledge further around this particular area. But it's a really important thing that we spend time really reflecting about what that child is interested in. So if you've got a child who's, say, got a superhero doll, and they're running around your environment with this doll and the cape's flapping in the wind, you might look and think, superheroes, they love superheroes, it's absolutely fantastic, or they love flying superheroes. And you might choose to go down the route of the superheroes, like an interest-led approach. But actually, if that child's really interested in the flapping of the cape, that's actually a different journey entirely. So taking that time after you've spotted that scheme to really reflect, think really carefully about what small thing can I provide that's familiar enough to the child that they can make links to it, they can play with it straight away, and we can help drip in more knowledge, more skills as we move forward. Now, we start off with simple scheme spotting, but by the end of it, we're looking to have a journey of at least 6 observations joined together. And that process could be over 6 weeks, could be over 6 months. I've got one childminder who's on the same cohort as you, Beth, actually, who's really stretching out over a long period of time because she's got children with quite complex needs, but also quite complex interests. So it's looking for those connections over a long period of time. And actually, the people who've gone through the accreditation, they've got the award, they've got the plaque, but actually a lot of people say it's changed their practice quite considerably because it's not just about forming those little mini topics around an interest, it's now really tuning into those physical behaviours.
Very interesting. I would imagine I've read quite a bit about schemas, and I will definitely be looking at that, looking at your courses, because I didn't realise that you did them. Naive of me, but I will head over and have a look. But yeah, how interesting, and it's just breaking that down and seeing what you can do to aid them to move forward, and it's just those links. I think children are just amazing, aren't they?
Yeah, and I think truly, if you've got an environment that is rich enough in open-ended resources and has really relaxed rules around, moving resources from one place to another, what I love about childminders is we don't tend to have a maths area and a sand area. We tend to have more fluidity in the environment. But if there's anyone listening who's from, say, a more formal setting or a more structured group setting, if we have that fluidity, if we allow children to move resources about, have the wealth and the richness of the resources, a lot of these behaviours will emerge naturally. We don't have to take any kind of leadership on that. Our role is to observe and support them and to find new things to provide over a longer period of time. But the children, these are natural behaviours. Children will do this.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter where you are in the world, where you're from in terms of time. Children have always done this sort of stuff. And this is not new. People have been talking about schema for a very long time. They've just had different names for it. In the UK, we're not as good at making the connection between the physical manifestation and the thought process behind it, but I think we are getting there. Lots of people are making, having those conversations. I think the big thing for me, for a lot of practitioners, is the lack of the richness in their continuous provision to get this process going. If people are saying, well, actually I'm seeing lots of either destructive behaviours or I'm seeing fewer schemes or schemas at all, it could be because you are maybe having a more formal approach that perhaps you need to relax and soften a little bit. And I'm not saying people should change their entire practice, but perhaps having a loose parts area or a collection of loose parts resources in baskets near to a construction space or a sand space, and just see what the children do with that. Just give them that opportunity. What's the worst that could happen if you just give them a little bit of flexibility? You might have a few resources broken, but you might begin to see some really powerful play.
And that's it. It's just changing just little bits here and there, isn't it?
Yeah.
In our play kitchen, we don't have play food. We have things like pine cones and shells and things from the beach, which can be anything. And they use that. They might say, "Oh, Sam, here's a cake," or they might turn around and just bag it up, or they might row it up in a line, or it's just seeing what they can do. So it's just changing little bits, isn't it?
It is. And if you think about making a cake, when I make a cake in my kitchen, I get a bowl and I mix all the ingredients together with a spoon. And if you've got all those pine cones in a bowl, you can mix it. It actually,
Yeah.
the action in mixing, it makes sense. Whereas if you put a plastic formed cake in a bowl and do this, it doesn't really do anything. Let's be honest.
No, it doesn't.
So that's the beauty of the open-ended resources. Is it's not quite it's not quite the ingredients for a cake, but we're kind of replicating some of the components and properties of that, and that's the beauty of those loose parts resources for that.
And that's where I think nature comes in really well, doesn't it? Because nature just gives us so many loose parts
Oh,
to be able to do
100%.
things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I say to people, use autumn. You go and gather your resources,
Oh,
dry
I
them,
love
store them.
autumn. Autumn is my favourite. You've got conkers, pine cones, sycamores. It's just helicopters. There's so many free resources.
Yeah, 100%. But people need to gather and store and not just put them all out.
100%.
Yeah, get yourself some vacuum bags of things that are dried in your cupboard, so you've got a continuous supply throughout the year. No, amazing. But yeah, lovely. So that's Schema Play in a nutshell, guys.
Marvelous. Thank you so much. Is there any top tips that you could give our listeners if they're thinking of extending their knowledge into schemas?
So definitely reach out to us. So because Schema Play is a different company that I work with,
Yeah.
I'd recommend that you go to the Schema Play website, so schemaplay.com, reach out to the people
Yeah.
that way. Almost always I find out that people have reached out to them and I get offered the work, because I tend to do a lot of I'll go anywhere in the country, and especially if it's a childminder, I'll do a lot of stuff on Zoom, whereas the other trainers tend to be more localised. But definitely reach out to it. There's a lot of free information out there as well. Lynette Brock, who is one of the people who runs Schema Play, she's done quite a lot of talks. I saw a video of hers on YouTube. It was a Montessori Europe video, and she talked at length about Schema Play. But there's a lot of free information out there. What I would say is quite a lot of the texts that you get, a lot of the training you'll see will talk about the behaviours and not recognise the thinking behind it. So what I'd say is do quite a broad amount of research. If you're really interested in this, really cast your net quite wide. I know the Pen Green Centre does a lot of this work as well, and they've got a separate programme where they go deep into scheme and schema too. But I suppose the top tip for me is, if you want to see these happening in your environment and you want to do something about it, you've got to shift your resources away from a narrow focused approach towards loose parts based play. And that's how I got into it, because loose parts is my favourite thing. You can see behind me I've got little gallery of things. My whole house is full of them because I know the capacity contained within
Yeah.
them. If you do that, you will see this stuff. If you build it, they will come. It will happen.
Amazing. Whereas, like I said, there's a lot of books and things out there, but it says, oh, this is what transporting is, this is what rotation is, but it's just pushing that further level, isn't it? And thinking, right, okay, how can I support those children that are, displaying those schemas? What do they actually mean? So, like you say, just a deeper understanding, and that's something where I'll be heading to have a look at a deeper understanding. But thank you, James, so much for coming in and talking to us on a Sunday morning.
You are welcome.
Yes,
I'm
thank
going
you
to
very
have
much.
my
I've got
cup of
one
coffee.
question, James. Sorry. What are your top 5 loose parts that...
Ooh,
Oh, I love that, Beth.
right.
Nothing
that's
to put you on the spot, James.
Okay,
if
so that's
someone
really
hasn't
interesting.
got any loose parts, or they're thinking, I don't know where to start here, I've listened to the podcast, I'm going to go and have a look at the website to see if I can further do any more training on it. But what are the 5 top resources or loose parts that you think would
Okay, so some people won't like what I'm about to say here, so brace yourselves. So Piaget also tells us about the difference between play and exploration. Now, play is our desired outcome, it's what we want children to do, but in order to get to play, you have to explore a resource first. You have to use your senses to make sense of it. if you don't, you're not able to play with it. So I would always argue that if you're starting from scratch with loose parts play, pick things that children have already had experience of in their lives, such as straws, bottle tops and other things from your recycling bin, which doesn't resonate with those people who might want like quite a nice pretty collection. I'll get to that because you're going to get there, but start with those things because the children know them already. Now arguably things like Duplo, stickle bricks, wooden blocks, those are all a part of the same realm. Play-Doh's part of the same realm. Christmas beads, essentially anything they've seen before, start with that. That would be my sort of first one. After that, I would then look at the things that are quite common that can be quickly and easily replaced. So pine cones, shells, acorns, sycamore keys. Because once a child begins to use something, they'll want to go back and use it multiple times. But if you've got that beautiful, gorgeous set of door handles from the charity shop, but they've gone missing, I can't replace them because they were a one-off, you've lost that opportunity for play. So the next things should really be that sort of common collection of stuff that you see in most settings, you know, your shells, your pine cones, sycamore keys, etc. And then after that, I will be starting to look at specifically what the interests are of the children. But people forget things like the auditory aspects of loose parts play, so things like chains, Christmas beads, things that make some kind of sound or have a texture to them. I'd be leaning into that as well.
Cool.
So not quite
Amazing.
5, but you know.
No, it just gives you a little starting point, and that's exactly what we want. So, like I say, I appreciate you coming in on a Sunday morning. Thank you very much, James.
Thanks, guys. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.